Hey, welcome to the K-Shot Podcast. I'm Brian.
I'm Iron Dutch Murdoch.
And Big Bob.
So, Bob, we're going to, each week we come out, we talk about a variety of different things. We talk about MMA, we talk about pro wrestling. We've been talking about pro wrestling quite a bit here lately. And, of course, in light of what's going on here in the this day and age with the coronavirus and stuff like that, pro wrestling is really about the only new product that you're getting on a regular basis. They're wrestling in empty arenas, and to their credit, they're making an attempt to give people during this time fresh programming, because there's no sports right now. There's Dana White is struggling to put together the April 18th card that's coming up, and he's running into multiple challenges with that. But anyways, to kind of bring our listeners up to speed, kind of give us a brief overview of your tenure as a wrestling fan and kind of where you're at now in this with us, please.
Well, I guess like anything, it started when I was a kid, probably in the 82, 83. I started watching what I like to call the golden age of wrestling. The advent of the Four Horsemen, Rock and Roll Express, and that type of stuff, NWA and WWF. Later on, I discovered AWA throughout the 80s, and took a slight break in the early 90s, picked it back up in the beginnings of the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. And
Bob, let me stop you there for just a second. You said you took a slight break in the 90s. What led you to stop?
Well, when I got into high school and I discovered girls, and I didn't have time to watch TV much. And then the rest is history from there, and then kind of fell back into it when everyone else did with the Monday Night Wars. Then throughout the Monday Night Wars, and I was clearly a WCW backer. I was very upset when WCW folded, was mishandled, and finally defeated by the WWE. And I was a little sour there for a couple years, so I took a break, the early 2000s, and then again rediscovered it when about the time I'm not sure who the big draw was at the time, but
and I can't necessarily pinpoint that this is you and I have discussed wrestling for years now, and and I went through a period where I wasn't watching wrestling for a very matter of fact up until here recently. I have not been a strong wrestling fan at all. And we'll go more into that here in a bit. But I think the last time I remember you really having a strong interest in any type of wrestling was when CM Punk was involved with WWE.
Yeah, that was probably the culmination of the last time I was into wrestling was during the year of CM Punk when he had his title reign, and I think he did a lot of good work, and the company in general was doing a lot of good things. Once that come to an end, I think the company started going in a direction that I didn't quite agree with. The biggest issue I had was the way they handled Brock Lesnar, his second tenure after his MMA fighting. When he come back into the company, and they made him more of an attraction more than a wrestler, and they put the strap on him, and he wrestled 3 times a year. That was a big turnoff for me, and that was probably what did it for me. Not that I don't care for Brock Lesnar as a performer. I think he's a good wrestler. He's a great wrestler, actually. I respect what he did in his amateur days. I've respected what he did in his MMA. I respect his ability. I don't agree with how they handled him, and that was a huge turnoff for me. It became very, very bland, and a lot of the talent in my opinion, was reflected that way. It was just same show every week, and there was very little diversity. And I think WWE suffered from lack of competition at the time, because when I quit watching, there was no AEW. Ring of Honor was a thing, but it was a blip on the radar. It wasn't nothing major at the time. Now I think it's come more to the fore. Same as the new NWA, and a lot of options now. Unfortunately, I can't say never, but right now it was a little too late for me. I've sampled some of NWA and AEW, and just for me, it just wasn't the same. So right now, I'm currently not watching anything. I'm a casual listener. I keep up with what's going on off the internet, but as far as tuning in, I haven't watched a wrestling match live in well over 2 years. So
now with the WWE, I've dropped off. It's been a long. I can't tell you when the last time I did watch it. I mean, I would watch certain cards. I would sometimes watch, like WrestleMania, but they got so long, it did not seem like I was falling asleep on them because they're so long. Mm-hmm. And then the matches I had no emotional investments in because I was never watching them except for WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble. And they brought CM Punk back, but I think he's been more. I don't like how
Fox brought him back.
Well, Fox brought him back. I get it on their talk show, but it seems like as negative as he is. Now, there's rumor that Vince McMahon said never trust him. Don't bring him in here. Well, the way he talks, I wouldn't bring CM Punk in there. I could see him going somewhere else, but not there.
Right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, WWE has a TV deal with ESPN, or I'm sorry, Fox, and Fox brought him in as an analyst. A lot of people feel that was an end around to get CM Punk for Vince and WWE to bring him in without having to say, hey, here, we're all's forgiven. I think a lot of people are still under the impression that he's going to eventually get in the ring and compete. But I agree with you. Some of the things that CM Punk's saying, Vince would have to be crazy to let him in there. He's very critical.
So, one of the things I want to touch on real quick, you were talking about the length of WrestleMania. And obviously I did not watch this year's WrestleMania. Not because I'm opposed to them doing it the way they did it. I mean, again, if anything, I appreciate the fact that pro wrestling, and this is all of the companies, I appreciate that they are at least trying to provide, in my opinion, a service. They're trying to still provide you with entertainment to get you through this time. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I take my hat off to them, because that's a tough sell to take men and women who basically are going out there and performing for live audiences. That'd be like saying, Bob, I'm going to get you to do a stand-up comedy routine to an empty theater. And then you go out and you deliver this killer set, but you don't know if you're really killing it or not, because you don't have reaction. You don't, and like Brian, like you've said before, there's some spots with pro wrestling that is meant to garner a laugh. They want you, they want it to be a lighthearted moment. They want you to laugh. They want you to, whereas other instances, they people do something, they want you to stand to your feet and boo and shake your fist at them. But that emotional storytelling that they're trying to elicit with their matches and stuff, or with their interviews, is gone, because right now they're relying solely on TV. But now I digress. I'm getting off the point here, but the last WrestleMania I watched was it was when Ronda Rousey was on it. I think she was main event, and if I'm not mistaken, Brock was taking on, was it Seth Rollins?
Last year?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember who.
But all I remember is this: I went over to watch WrestleMania. We were, going to all get together and watch it. And when I got there, Brock Lesnar had already wrestled, and it was a squash match. I think you and I, Bob, had talked.
He wrestled Bill Goldberg last year.
Was it Bill Goldberg?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's right. Well, anyway, but it was over in no time flat, and so the whole reason I went to watch WrestleMania was for that match, was for Bill Goldberg, and well, more to the point was to see Brock Lesnar. I'm a Brock Lesnar guy, and how I got there and it was already gone. And then like you said, I don't watch the regular programming, and last year I think they rang in at 7 hours.
Yeah.
Of maybe back in the day when I was in the heat of my fandom with pro wrestling, maybe I could have given them that. But even that is a stretch. I think that 7 hours is way too much programming. Way too much programming.
I think they missed the point with WrestleMania. I believe WrestleMania is supposed to showcase the best of what they have to offer for the year. And now everybody gets a match at WrestleMania. They have undercard matches that in the past wouldn't even made it on the air, and now they're showing matches just.
It's filler.
It's filler, exactly. I agree. Shoot, I believe the three of us sat down and watched maybe 4 years ago WrestleMania. And even then, we commented on how long it was. I think it stretched to a 4-hour show. And we were just like, yeah. And at the time, I believe we were still pretty heavy into it, if I'm not mistaken. And it was too much for us then. So 7 hours now, that's insane.
I will say this. I think at the time you were still involved. My interest in pro wrestling honestly did not return until these other smaller guys started coming back around. NWA has relit my fandom. I'm not going to sit here and paint that I'm the same fan with NWA today that I was, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Okay, because growing up in the Crockett era of wrestling, it's hard. And you got to understand too, when I say the Crockett era of wrestling, I know that kind of encompasses just the Mid-Atlantic area. But look how many guys came from AWA. Look how many guys came from World Class Wrestling. World Class. I knew the World Class Wrestling guys not only because some of those guys came in and out of here with NWA with Crockett Promotions, but because of the magazines and stuff like that. So. We knew a lot of them guys. About the only group that really didn't, AWA didn't come through here, but those guys were kind of like world class. Sometimes they'd intermingle down through this way. Baron Von Raschke made a run through here. Of course, Road Warriors came from up that way, down this way. We did get to see some of those guys, but about the only group that didn't come through was your WWE guys, or WWF back in the day, you know what I'm saying? But we saw them on TV, But wrestling from that genre, still, then there's a lot of reasons for that. One, back in the day, the wrestlers protected the business. Look, at the end of the day, Bob, if you and I were feuding, okay, you and I might be good friends behind the curtain, but that stays behind the curtain. We're not going to be sitting down at, a restaurant having a meal together and then getting online, posting pictures. Of course, the internet, like you said, is one of the worst things that ever happened to pro wrestling. But you protect the business. If I'm an egg-sucking dog this week, until you do a babyface turn and come out and, or I do a heel turn and we become best friends again, you and I weren't seen together. And we didn't get there and compliment each other. Ric Flair will tell you about everybody he made money with right now. But now we're talking about a man that's retired, that's not trying to sell you and bring you to the arena to see him wrestle. The wrestlers also protected the business in the sense to where they set the matches up to look like legitimate contests. If you watch Tully Blanchard and Magnum TA have their I Quit match, which is an iconic match, it looks like a legitimate contest.
You're right. If back in the day when Tully Blanchard lit that fireball in Dusty Rhodes' face and you thought Dusty Rhodes was crippled, and then the next night you saw him at Sizzler eating together, it would have ruined the entire gimmick. So, same thing as today. If Undertaker and AJ Styles were seen post-match out on the street, arms around each other, nobody'd say anything now. Back in the day, that would have been a huge mistake, faux pas, whatever you want to say. So, and that leads more to the reason why I've kind of hung it up as a wrestling fan as a whole, because it's just, the old saying is you can't ever go home again. And I feel that way. Unless something drastically changes in wrestling, I think I'm a retired fan.
Do you know if there's any, what in particular would be that thing it would be that they could do to bring you back? Like, look, NWA, like Aaron Dutch was saying, I enjoy NWA. I enjoy Ring of Honor. Them are my two favorite promotions. But at the same time, I'm not like rushing. Well, it's a completely different too, because you can get on YouTube and watch the NWA, which is a terrific idea. They're smart. They're using the technology wisely. You know, but what would you say would be? Is there anything like what could be big? Because it's hard for me to get back into WWE, or even, and I'm looking at AEW, and that drives me. Like, I'm glad they got competition, but it's not enough. I don't rush over it. If someone said we don't get together to watch AEW,
myself and Aaron Dutch had talked about it in the past. I think what would reinvigorate things or start to would be if they were to bring something back, like he made reference to just a little while ago, the territories. If they started cross-promotion wrestling, territories, made titles mean something again, where they're not just changing hands nightly. If you were the World Heavyweight Champion, it meant something back in the day. And you could go from, Mid-South to world class, and oh wait, we've got the champ coming. It was an event. Back on Superstation, when Ric Flair was going to be on, it was an event. People would tune in, and they would use that as a way to get you to watch the entire show, because Ric Flair, the World Heavyweight Champion, was going to address the crowd.
Well, and here's the other thing, too, that Ric Flair did a perfect job of. And you go back through and watch any of the promos he cut throughout the career, okay? And again, this is going to be more Crockett Promotions, the Crockett era stuff. He was a master salesman, okay? Ric Flair couldn't cut a promo that he didn't mention Dusty Rhodes in. Okay, so first off, you as a fan, you're sitting here, you're watching the world champ Ric Flair on TV, first off, okay? And he's going to address whoever's in front of him as far as the match, whether it be Ronnie Garvin, Wahoo McDaniel, doesn't matter. He's going to address them, but he's also going to address the fact that what's giving him the level of credentials that he's got is that he's already beat the Dusty Rhodes and the Wahoo McDaniels, and he's going to go down a litany of wrestlers, the Briscoes, Jack Briscoe and Jerry Briscoe and Terry Funk and Dory Funk. He's going to give you a list of all these guys that he's either beat or that have made him the wrestler he is today. But he's always going to be selling the business. He's always going to be selling those guys. So when Terry Funk comes out, whether you know it or you don't know it, Terry Funk carries some weight with you, because Ric Flair won't let you forget who Terry Funk is. He definitely doesn't let you forget who Dusty Rhodes is.
Right.
At the end of the day, Dusty Rhodes' number one fan was Ric Flair, even when they was trying to break his leg. You know what I mean?
That's
for
right.
real.
Well, again, going back to what we were saying, and I agree 100%, I think that would be what could possibly bring me back, is if titles meant something again. I mentioned in a previous time talking about CM Punk and what made it so exciting. His title reign for a year was an old school title reign, where he held that belt and he defended it on the regular, and it was an event when he lost it. It was a special wrestler that beat him, that took the belt, and it was built up. Now you've got like I don't know, Roman Reigns. He'll win the belt on a Monday night, and then Seth Rollins will win it the next Monday night, and then someone else will win it the next Monday night. The WWE title is a paper title to me.
Now, let me interject a couple of points I'd like to point out here. One, you're talking about the title meaning something again. NWA is absolutely on board with you in that mentality, because Nick Aldis, who's their current champion, is just that. He's going to these other promotions. They're working very closely with Ring of Honor. Matter of fact, Ring of Honor and vice versa, they have been on each other's programming. Marty Scurll, who, when we went to the Crockett Cup, challenged for the title, NWA title, before they launched NWA Power, okay? But since they've launched NWA Power, now Marty Scurll and Villain Enterprises has shown up on NWA programming. And in turn, Nick Aldis has shown up on Ring of Honor programming. So there's definitely a relationship there. And I want to say NWA has another relationship, don't they? Or is it Ring of Honor? I'm confusing. Well, but be it here or there,
Right.
what they're doing is Nick Aldis isn't just defending his title there in the NWA, or the within the confines of the company. There, he's defending his title to others, and so he's bringing that feel back that it's a true world championship. Now, they really want to break some ground. Let's have a Ring of Honor world champion versus NWA world champion. Now, I'm going to tell you right now where I land on that side of the fence. NWA champion is your champion. To me, the NWA champion is your wrestling champion, because when you look at that belt, Bob, that's the same belt that Harley Race carried. You know what I'm saying? That the Funks carried. I'm going to sound like Ric Flair here going down the list here, but Ric Flair carried. That belt hasn't changed. That's still the symbol of excellence, in my opinion. That's the championship belt, okay? Now, talking about the quick title changes, you talk about wrestling and trying to stay current. Wrestling's always done a good job of blurring the lines. They really have. And one of the things that has made wrestling, I think, as enduring as it has been is the fact that it's such a fluid product that they really can kind of move and change. If you just look at the WWE's history, and if you look at WWE when it was in the throes of Hulkamania, and they're selling ice cream, in Saturday morning cartoons, to the Stone Cold era, same company, completely different feel. You know what I'm saying? Completely different market that they're going after. But I think in order to make wrestling believable to some extent, look at UFC, for example. Right? You knock me out tonight, and in your first title defense against Brian, he's got you looking at the lights now. You know what I'm saying? Or he makes you tap out. So you don't even get a good title defense under your belt. You see what I'm saying? So to some extent, but there's got to be a balance to it. I'm like you. I like when there's a champion that is long-term. Nick Aldis has been a long-term champion. CM Punk had a long-term champion. I like those guys coming out. But that also being said, if you're going to sell anybody's got a puncher's chance kind of, if you're blurring that line there, well, the reality is, if you really want to get down to it, if WWE really wanted to throw the monkey wrench into things, what if on one given night Zack Ryder got a shot and Zack Ryder shocked the world and beat CM Punk? Now, business people would tell you that's insane, because Zack Ryder would not be the guy to carry the title in the company, because he's, his woo might be hot on the internet and for his however many fans were watching that, but that's not who the company needs to go forward with. But how many times in the boxing world has somebody come along, Buster Douglas, prime example. Mike Tyson was one of the best things that ever happened to boxing. And when Buster Douglas come in there and put him down and made him look at the lights, Buster Douglas was not the same fighter that Mike Tyson was.
Well, Andy Ruiz also. I think he was the latest one who won against Anthony Joshua. But in the immediate rematch, they lost. He got beat up and lost. So is there anything out there now? What are you watching now if you're not watching wrestling to get the... Because we could easily... And what I started thinking about was it just entertainment-wise was the Marvel movies. And like when I was a kid, I felt like when Endgame came out, it like ended the... I have no interest in Phase 4. Nothing that they've done. And that's what, when you talk about not having no interest in wrestling, that's where I'm getting pulled, is like with Marvel. Like, yeah, I want to see it. Like, I might be interested in it. So, is there anything like that? Or, we can go start going down Marvel for all, really.
Well, it's as far as like getting a wrestling fix. No, that's pretty much. I've kind of closed the book on that type of entertainment. Not to say I'm completely closed off. I can always come out of retirement, so to speak.
Do you follow any combat sports like UFC or boxing or?
Not really at this point. I haven't had the interest in it.
Because I know at one point you've talked before about how you were watching boxing pretty close, and I will say this, and we've talked briefly about this, but with the old Gypsy King and the Bronze Bomber doing their thing, those guys are putting a lot of positive spin.
They have.
They're doing a lot of good things for boxing.
They have, and this last heavyweight fight, I kept up with that pretty closely. That was very entertaining. I might be interested in that in the future, but you brought up Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas. At the center of all that was Don King, and I feel like Don King did a lot more damage to boxing than he did positive. My father was a huge boxing fan, got me into boxing when I was a young boy, and it was enough. Don King was enough to kill the sport for him, and I would agree. That and your Floyd Mayweathers didn't do any favors for me. Didn't care for his style. Didn't care for his persona per se. And even though I've got that wrestling background, I think a lot of his bravado was brought on from wrestling. Kind of turned off boxing for me for a long time.
Well, it's funny you talk about how Floyd drew from pro wrestling. Muhammad Ali drew from pro wrestling as well.
That's right.
And matter of fact, probably something that, a book you actually turned me on to there about the match between Inoki and Muhammad Ali. And I'll be honest, I'm down to the last 4 chapters, but I'm struggling to finish it. And the reason I'm struggling to finish the book is because it's down to the actual event. And anybody that's not familiar with when Antonio Inoki fought Muhammad Ali, what they don't understand is that if that match was to be made today, it would be a completely different match than what it was then. It was boring, okay? It's still boring, and trying to read about it is very boring. But in the book, it talked about, Muhammad Ali, as he was growing his persona. Gorgeous George, the original Gorgeous George, was very influential on him because that guy drew massive heat and really got people to talking and this and the other. And then they put, and I know for that match with Inoki, Classy Freddie Blassie was aligned with Ali. And, now this goes back to, you got to understand too, this is an era of pro wrestling too that one was still a protected business. Now, there were people talking, oh, it's fake, it's it's this, that, and the other. Inoki wanted an absolute legitimate contest between Muhammad Ali and himself. Obviously, the boxing and the promoters and stuff like that, they get involved, and there was so much, you can do this, but you can't do that, to the point to where, at the end of the day, Inoki's hands were so tied at that point that there was no way you were going to have a good match.
If memory serves, I believe Inoki also was upholding the old school wrestling, that it was a legitimate contest. So much so that the Japanese culture still maintains it. And I believe he was trying to legitimize.
Well, and you had catch wrestlers like Carl Gotch and people like that who were legitimate with their in other words, these are guys, go in there and grapple with him, and he's going to twist you into a pretzel.
That's right.
What a lot of people don't know about the evolution of pro wrestling is that's where pro wrestling actually evolved from, was legitimate contests. And the reason that promoters got to where they were determining the outcome was because, okay, you're coming from the Midwest, and out in the Midwest, man, you were twisting guys left and right. You were just mauling them like a bear, okay? But as you grew in popularity and the events and and the work you were getting better talent coming against you. Well, then finally, you make it out here to the East Coast. Well, out here on the East Coast, Brian's the big dog. So when you two finally lock horns, a lot of people want to see it. But it also has the ability to become a snore fest quickly, because two guys laying on the ground grappling is not exciting to watch. It's just not. And so while the promoters recognize the fact that, hey, I got two big names here that I can make a lot of money with if I can get them in the ring together, but they also realize that I can put these guys in the ring, and if an hour later they're still laying on the mat grappling with each other, or they're not engaging, people are going to lose interest, and they're not going to pay the money to come see it because it's going to be boring. They're not paying to see you guys be safe. They're paying to see you guys get in there, man, and prove who's the better man and engage each other. And so the promoter said, you know what, I can fix this. Bob's going to let you lose tonight, and this is how we're going to do it. And so then they started determining the outcomes. And then, and that kept the heat of the crowd going, and it brought people in. I mean, at the end of the day, listen, you didn't have people jumping the rails back in the day because they believed it was fake.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
You brought up Don King real quick. Do you think maybe Vince McMahon has now turned into a Don King? Because Don King had promoted some of the biggest fights
In history.
to a point, correct, in history of boxing. He got to a point that maybe it was time for him to actually exit stage left, but he hung around, and I guess he's gone. Well, I know he's gone now. But do you think maybe Vince McMahon has held, like he has made changes when they've come out, 2 years ago, a year and a half, whatever, they were like, well, we're going to listen to the fans. You're now into authority. You're going to make the changes, and they make this big announcement, and of course it's business as usual. Do you think maybe Vince McMahon has just turned into Don King? It's time for him to actually exit. And he's done great things. We can't dispute that. I think the look, the way he promotes, the merchandising, all that good stuff.
You talking about Vince McMahon?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, to that point, yeah, I would agree that they're similar. The biggest problem is Vince McMahon was a promoter of a staged product, and Don King was supposed to be a promoter of a legitimate contest. And unfortunately, a lot of Don King's legacy is that his promotions were rigged and his legitimate fights were rigged. My dad believed, as a boxing expert, he was a Golden Gloves boxer in the Army and followed the sport for a better part of 30 years before he hung it up. And his opinion was the Buster Douglas fight was fixed, and he was convinced of it. He even pointed out several deficiencies in the fight. The single combo, 3-punch combo that Mike Tyson threw, I believe it was in the 5th round, he knocked Buster Douglas down. And Mike Tyson had a look on his face like, oh no, I've done it. And he stepped to the corner, and Buster Douglas got up. It was the only time Douglas went down, I believe, is from my memory. And I remember that stuck with me when Dad remembered that. The details might be fuzzy, but I remember that.
Didn't Buster Douglas get knocked out? Didn't they do the 10 count? Well, he would have lost, wouldn't he?
So the controversy with when Buster Douglas went down was that the guy there's two people that began a 10 count as soon as he went down. There's the guy on the outside of the ring that started 10 count, and then there's the referee's 10 count. And where people dispute the 10 count and say that Buster Douglas was actually done is that the guy on the outside of the ring reached 10, and the referee reached 9, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Well, again, and that just leads more to it. Dad doesn't even talk about the 10 count. He just talks about the combination and the whole rest of the fight. Mike Tyson was not aggressive. He was not the monster that he was prior to that fight and after, before he went to prison. That one match, why was he so defensive? A lot of people argue that he was afraid of Buster, and rightly so, for the knockout power. History sees something different. And again, it all leads to Don King's meddling. And Mike Tyson at the time was trying to establish his legacy. Everyone's compared to Muhammad Ali, and for good reason. He's the best. Okay? Well, you don't remember Muhammad Ali for one title. I believe it's 6, right? Rocky Marciano is undefeated. He only had the one title. So, which legacy are you looking to do? The most or the best? Well, Mike Tyson, the only way he's going to get to 6 is if he loses. So, a controlled loss in Buster Douglas makes sense if you look at building a legacy. Because then Tyson was setting up for a new fight when his legal troubles began.
Did he go...
Buster Douglas
lost to
Evander Holyfield.
Evander Holyfield, and then that was setting up the Mike Tyson Evander Holyfield fight, because I remember that was all over Slurpee cups. I mean, it was hot.
That was going to happen,
Right.
And prior to that, Evander Holyfield had ducked Mike Tyson.
Do you think he ducked him?
Oh yeah, in the beginning.
Well,
in the 80s.
I can't make a strong argument that he didn't, because I can't say that I was following the sport close enough to say that he did. I do know that Evander Holyfield was in the audience the night that Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, and that they clearly said that the next person in line for the title shot was Evander Holyfield.
At the time, Mike Tyson was killing everybody the first round. I mean, nobody was making it out. I mean, he was knocking everyone out. I believe, and again, I don't have it. This is a long time ago. If I remember correctly, on 2 different occasions, Evander Holyfield fought a lesser fighter when he had an opportunity to fight Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson fought who I don't remember who it was prior to Buster Douglas, but
Who Mike Tyson fought?
Yeah. I don't remember who, but I believe that fight was a potential meeting that didn't happen. And then the Buster Douglas fight was yet another chance, because both times were promoted. This could be an opportunity for those 2 heavyweights to meet.
Was it Razor Ruddock
I
right
don't
before Buster Douglas?
No, Razor Ruddock was after Buster Douglas. Keep talking.
Yeah,
Or it may have been Frank Bruno.
I believe it was a tomato can. I
don't believe Frank Bruno was a tomato can, because I think he went 5 rounds. The problem was, and what we've never seen again since Mike Tyson in boxing, is the fear that man placed on his fighters. Okay, because a lot of times, and I think most people would agree, Mike Tyson had those guys beaten before he ever stepped. It was Carl Williams. Okay, Carl Williams. It was Frank Bruno, Carl Williams, and then he lost to Buster Douglas. But Mike Tyson had those guys beaten before they ever walked, before he ever got in the ring. We've never seen a fighter that carried that amount of fear.
I don't remember which fight it was. Before that, he was beating some people. He hit somebody so hard they quit. Who was it?
Let me see if I found it.
I would love nothing more than a Mike Tyson style fighter to come back through the ranks.
Absolutely.
Because you talk about an attraction. You talk about Brock Lesnar being an attraction. Well, the reason I think that Brock Lesnar is the attraction that he is he's a monster. I mean, the guy's huge. He's so talented. He's aggressive. His persona is aggressive. I mean, Brock's a scary dude, and and I think that's a lot of like with Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson had the look, and the skill that just made him just.
I maintain, or my father maintained, and I agreed with him, that if Evander Holyfield had fought Mike Tyson prior to prison, Mike Tyson beats Holyfield. Holyfield beat him because he outboxed him after the fact. But with the momentum that Mike Tyson had, where he was chewing everyone up prior to his prison stint, Dad feels that he would have beat Evander.
Well, for what it's worth, Evander Holyfield got screwed out of the gold medal, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think the difference that Mike Tyson or that Evander Holyfield did against Mike Tyson, that it was him not being afraid. A lot of them guys walked in there and fought him afraid, and I think that's where it would have probably played out. I would have liked to have seen because Mike Tyson at that point, had he fought him before his loss or even before prison, he still had that fear.
That's right.
I think one thing that hurt Mike Tyson a lot was when he came out of prison, not just a prison stint, but that Peter McNeely fight, that looked like a rigged fight.
That absolutely had to be. If that wasn't a rigged fight, let me put it to you this way. Peter McNeely had no desire to go in there and truly challenge Mike Tyson. That was just for him to be able to say, oh, hey, look, guys, I fought Mike Tyson.
You're right.
That was an embarrassment is what that was.
Well, that goes back to what I was talking about with Don King. And there were several other fights that Don King set up because Mike Tyson wasn't his only person he was promoting. I don't remember the boxers. There's a list, and the fights very notoriously decisions were given that were made where they clearly were the lesser boxer and they won the match. And a lot of it had to do setting up title matches.
And I think you could make that same argument with when George Foreman made his return, And I love George Foreman. Don't get me wrong, man. I don't have any ill will towards that man. And I enjoyed it, and him recapturing the World Heavyweight title back when he did was impressive, okay? But I watched enough of his fights and watched him get his face beat raw and then wondered, how is he getting the decision in this?
Exactly.
That
was Dad's biggest thing. He and that's what did it for the sport for him was a lot of boxing was perceived to be rigged, and I don't know if they could ever come up with a better way to decide a boxing match. I could probably get back into boxing. You were asking what would get me back into combat sports. I think if they had a better way, it's very subjective.
So let me flick this past you. This is one thing that is kind of on the horizon right now. It's not something that's going forward throughout. When you talk about combat sports, okay, you're talking obviously kickboxing. You're talking mixed martial arts like UFC. You're talking boxing, things of this nature. Your prominent ones are your boxing and your mixed martial arts there. What's being floated and tested in a few of these smaller companies is live scoring. In other words, they're not hiding the judges' cards in between. You're not waiting until the end to find out how you're doing on the judges' cards. It would be like at a baseball game or NBA or something like that. These guys would know how to do. So, no, you and I are fighting, and at the end of round 1, they come in. They go, Bob, you got it. That was a 10 round for you. Rick, that was a 9 round for you. So I already know I lost the first round. Now, what are your thoughts on that as far as going to? Do you feel that would help the sport or hurt the sport, having the rounds, how the judges are scoring it, go live like that?
Well, as a boxing purist, myself and John from my dad, I don't think that would be a good idea, because then it creates a more defensive fight. In other words, if you know you've got 3 rounds under your belt and you're ahead of me 3 rounds, now you're going to start being a more defensive boxer. That's part of the reason why it became a hidden score to begin with. You didn't know how you were doing. You were just supposed to go out there and fight. But with that said, I can see the benefit of doing something different, because right now, let's face it, boxing's not what it used to be. And
the old adage of don't leave it in the judge's hands is alive and well, my friend.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, because not only are you seeing it sometimes on boxing, like especially with Canelo and Triple G.
Gosh.
That was a travesty in that first fight.
Whoever the lady was that gave that score,
that was criminal what she did.
She should not be allowed to.
She shouldn't be allowed back in the building.
No.
But it happens like that too over in UFC. I mean, you've got times where if you don't finish the guy or make it convincing, you run the risk.
I might be old-fashioned. I believe when this system was developed, it was a different time and age. Integrity used to mean something. I believe when a judge would judge this, they had no ulterior motive other than they wanted to see a pure fight. And nowadays, there's too much influence, either through popularity, through, unfortunately, money, a personal agenda. I think judges don't come into it unbiased. Hell, you've got judges now that come in that will openly say they don't like a certain fighter that's in the fight. Well, how can you be a judge if you have a personal opinion?
Let me ask you another question, and Brian, weigh in on this as well too. Typically, the judges are ringside for the fight, and if that, all right, let's say that they do go to a live system where they're, the judges' scorecards are being revealed right there on the spot. Obviously, one thing we've talked about before is that crowd reaction could lend itself to skewing. If Conor McGregor's fighting and they show the scores and you've given the round to his opponent, and the crowd, you're in Ireland or you're somewhere where it's a pro Conor McGregor crowd, and they start booing you out of the arena, well, that may influence how you score the next one. So where I'm going is, my question being is, if they go to a scenario of live, of demonstrating the live scoring, in order to keep it unbiased and without influence, if you will, should the judges be in an area to where they are outside of the stimuli? In other words, they're seeing the fight live, but they're not ringside. In other words, they're not subjected to the environment, because a judge is like us. I mean, I would imagine, like you said, there's going to be referees that probably like some of these fighters better than they like other guys. And even if it's a matter of, like you and Brian get ready to fight, and say you and I have been friends for years, I don't know Brian from Adam, but I consider you a friend. Well, obviously, I'm going to do my job, but I want to see you win. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but I think that's a little bit easier. But, the other thing I think that makes scoring a fight, especially in combat sports, you called this money. Because you've got people that, if we said, hey, let's bet on this next fight, we may bet $20 a piece. And that's rich for our blood. You see what I'm saying? But you've got people that are betting thousands of dollars. And if it looks like their guy's getting ready to come up short because of some bad judging, there could be some implications.
That's right. I like your idea about having the judges removed from outside stimuli. I think it was the system's old school, and it was established where they're there and can see it live. I'm not saying tape it and let them judge it later or nothing like that, but I think maybe in a booth, in the arena but away from the crowd, maybe even soundproofed to where it's just them and they're watching the fight as it unfolds. That might be an answer. But again, I think unfortunately with the way things are, society's just different nowadays.
Let me ask you this. Do you know if when the judges are scoring the fight, they don't discuss it amongst themselves while they're sitting there?
No. No, if it's found out, then the fight's suspended. The judges and all that suspended. Another thing that they established back in the, I don't know the years, but they started doing anybody can judge. There's no criteria to a judge to a fight. I think that needs to be removed. If I'm a referee in a NFL game, I've come up through the system. I've refereed NCAA football. I've refereed for years. I've gone through an extensive vetting process, and there's years worth of footage of me calling games, and I'm held to the high standard. Boxing, that implicates, like you said, money, millions of dollars, and any person can be tapped to judge a fight with minimal background. I think that's absurd. I'm not trying to be chauvinistic, but again, to the Canelo fight, what background did that woman have to judge a boxing match?
So you bring up a good point here, and there's an argument that some of the MMA fighters are making. I don't know if you're familiar with who Frank Trigg is. Frank Trigg is a former MMA fighter. He fought in the UFC, okay? Frank has transitioned now into becoming a referee. And there's a lot of people praising him for the job he does as a referee, and the reason they're praising him for it is because Frank has been in a fight. Right. Frank has participated in the sport, and he knows it. And so when he's watching these guys to make sure they're not to work, because at the end of the day, yes, the referee's in there to officiate, but the biggest thing that referee's supposed to do, besides make sure the guys aren't cheating, is to protect the fighter.
Right.
Okay. You clock me, knock me out, and I curl toe. Okay, and I'm out. I'm seized, I'm all stiff and everything. Good referees in there before you throw the next punch, right, or at least making their run to get to me. Okay. The same thing I think could be said about being a judge. Should the judges have some type of a background, like you said, with it? Now, to the extent of what business does that lady have, I will say this: female combat sports is as growing as ever. Now, in the world of boxing, it's not where it is in MMA. MMA has taken it to a next level. But maybe she boxed. I don't know.
I just and again, I'm not trying to come across as chauvinist or whatever, but I don't think that she had that background. I think it's somebody she knew, and she may be a boxing fan, and I feel like on an amateur level, I could probably do a halfway decent job of judging a fight. But again, there's a big difference between me judging something down here at the Roanoke Civic Center, Berglund Center, and an amateur fight, and I'm a referee, or a world championship where millions of dollars is at stake. So, real quick while he's looking at that, what fight is that? Whose fight is that? Because I didn't recognize the fighters.
It's Pat Barry and Chet Conga.
All right, because are you familiar with the fight where he called him at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine showed me that. I just didn't know who the fighters were.
Well, that was an amazing fight.
Yeah, it was.
If Pat Barry would have backed up, he wouldn't have got caught there at the end. Chet Conga threw a Hail Mary in desperation.
I don't even know how he come off the mat.
I don't either, but it absolutely was a stunning ending, and that's the thing I think that attracts me to. You know what I love about MMA, and I enjoy boxing too. You know, I really do. I want to see boxing return to its glory days, and I'm not talking about the where the fans get all this hype and then they get in the ring and we get that feeling of I just got ripped off. I really like Canelo and Triple G was a fan favorite boxing match. I mean, those guys went in there and went to war. Both matches that Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder have done nothing but great things. There's gonna be a trilogy match between them guys. It's coming.
After the way that guy leaned on him, I don't see how they could put him in the match.
I'm telling you, man. Listen, Deontay Wilder, you cannot. Because listen, you owe it to yourself. Watch both fights, okay? Watch the way Deontay Wilder stretches out Tyson Fury in the first fight, okay?
Yeah.
He lays him down twice. Now, I realize the second fight, Fury took a different approach. He changed his game up and put on more weight. He leaned on him, this and that. But don't think Deontay Wilder's not going to adjust his course of fire.
That's true.
And you're talking about a guy that's got absolutely scary knockout with Deontay Wilder, that is. I mean, that guy lays people down left and right, man.
If there's a third fight, I'd like to watch it, but
there's going to be a third fight, yeah.
Watching the second fight, and from I admittedly I have not seen the first fight, but from what I understand, the second fight was so much more of a mismatch. I don't know.
So the first fight has the highlight reel of Tyson Fury getting knocked down in the 12th round. I mean, that's the one where pretty much it was like stick a fork in him. He's done. And then people started editing the Undertaker music to it because he opens his eyes, he sits up and gets up, and he's fine. And as a matter of fact, not only did he get up and return, man, he started taking it to Deontay Wilder after a vicious knockdown. It truly is like an Undertaker set. It is. It absolutely is. I mean, Deontay doesn't just hit him once. He hits him twice on his way down, okay? He puts him down hard, and Tyson Fury sets up from that and makes a hellacious cut. It's getting me excited thinking about it. That's how good that first fight was.
Yeah, the third fight's, I think, is going to be taking place in October. They moved it from July. That second fight was definitely a mismatch. It was strange how I was expecting a lot more out of Deontay Wilder, and it was like a different fighter. I know he says that he wore that 40-pound suit out there, and that kind of weighed him down and tired his legs out. But you know what? I really don't know. I don't want to say it didn't, but I just can't imagine. He was in the back walking around with. He had to get dressed, so who knows how long he had it on, 15, 20 minutes, 40 pounds on his shoulders. But it was the second match, even though it was fun to watch, it definitely was not like the first one.
Well, let's just face it, and I guess maybe this is justifying the third match. When Fury burst Wilder's eardrum, that changed the complexity of the fight. When the blood coming out of his ear and throwing him off balance. I mean, a lot could be said for Wilder to even continue the fight after that, because a lesser man would have probably tapped out.
I was glad to see his corner throw in the towel, because I think that's what your corner should do.
Right.
Is when you're getting beat up. I mean, there was a couple times where he was stumbling. Now you saw the second one, I assume. Okay, yeah. So you saw the times where there was a couple times where he actually stumbled over his own feet, and I was like, now back when I was younger, be a man, take a punch to the side of the head, and take a chair shot, whatever. But now it's like, come back and fight another day.
Well, we know now the ramifications to concussions and what can come from that. So now, back in the 80s and 90s when we were coming up, that just wasn't a thing.
You're right, but I will say this. I think that anybody that has a fighter drive, whether it be boxing, MMA, the football field, whatever. A guy wants to be carried off on a shield. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you're going to beat me, you're going to have to beat me.
Well, a boxing mentality, a combat sport in general, with my amateur wrestling background, you don't quit. You're trained not to quit, and you're trained to keep going. If you're bleeding, I bit my tongue in two and continued to match and won. You keep going. That's just what you do. So, Brian, more to your point, you're right. It was good that he had the corner to throw in the towel, because sometimes you just don't see it in the heat of battle. You think you can come back, and that's just the way it is. So,
well, so we're reaching the 1 hour mark here. Real quick before we go, I want to throw a question out here. If you were booked in an exhibition match, pro wrestling, as a gimmick match, to where you were booked to take on a midget, and you were booked to take on a midget, would you shoot on the midget? In other words, would you go stiff on him and put him over, or what would your take on it be?
Me personally, if I'm, I guess I'd get more pop from the crowd by laying down for the midget. So I'd probably go ahead and take the loss, because it would look better if the midget beats the bigger guy, right? That's more of a crowd favorite.
Like in WrestleMania.
Yeah, I'd probably take the loss, and then plead that I was robbed, rather than just beat the midget down and, oh, you're a big man, you beat the lesser guy. So I would take the loss.
What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I was just going to take that loss.
Now, what if the midget tried to come at you hard? What if it was one of those things where you already knew you were going to be looking at the lights to put him over for the to get the crowd pop, but he came at you hard, like it was like when he was throwing like a Scott Norton style punches on you?
Well, now I can't say that I wouldn't let my anger take over. I might have to bloody him before I laid on my shoulders, but yeah. I'd probably still have to look at the lights for the sympathy vote, but
so there'd be no Montreal screw job where you force this guy to take a loss, huh?
Nah. If anything, they'd probably quick count me and make sure I lost.
All right, so I guess we've hit that part of the show where y'all all good.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm Brian.
Iron Dutch Murdoch.
Big Bob.
And until next time, see you later. Thanks for listening to Potato Shop Podcast. You can listen to us on Podbean, SoundCloud, and all the other places you get your podcast. Follow us on Facebook and at Twitter at Potato Shop PC. On YouTube, we're under Potato Shop PC. Please click that subscribe and like and notification bell so you can see whenever we post something new there. So until next time, my friends, goodbye.